Imagine a land so vast, its borders stretch across 11 time zones, touching continents cradling empires. A land born not from a single, clear genesis, but from the swirling mists of legend, the clash of Norse longships, and the whispered prayers of Slavic tribes. This is Russia, a name that evokes an almost mythical grandeur, a complex tapestry woven from conquest and faith, innovation and isolation, triumph and tragedy. For over 1,000 years, from the legendary summoning of the Varangian prince Rurik to the tumultuous dawn of the 20th century, Russia has defied easy definition. But what truly lies beneath the surface of this colossal enigma, spanning centuries of profound change? Our journey begins in the 9th century, with the call for order echoing across nascent settlements, inviting foreign princes to rule. It is here, in the murky origins of Kievan Rus, that the seeds of a unique civilization were sown, a civilization constantly grappling with its identity, caught between the Byzantine East and the Latin West. We will witness the relentless eastward expansion, a slow, arduous crawl across the greatest landmass on Earth, absorbing cultures, enduring invasions, and forging a distinct, often brutal, imperial character. How did a scattered collection of settlements transform into an empire that would span a sixth of the world's landmass? This is a narrative defined by astonishing resilience, a people repeatedly brought to the brink by foreign invaders, internal strife, and crushing famines, only to rise again, often stronger, always changed. From the Mongol Yoke that reshaped its very soul, to the Romanov Dynasty that built a glittering, yet deeply stratified, empire, Russia's history is a cyclical dance of destruction and rebirth. It is the story of Tsars and serfs, poets and revolutionaries, saints and sinners, all contributing to a national character forged in the crucible of immense suffering and extraordinary endurance. But how did this enduring spirit lead to the brink of its most profound and violent transformation? We stand on the precipice of the 20th century, a moment when the ancient foundations of this colossal realm would be shaken to their very core. This is the epic saga of Russia, from the legendary call of Rurik to the eve of revolution, a journey through 1,000 years that continues to shape our world. The vast, forested plains and meandering rivers of what would one day become Russia were in the 9th century a mosaic of disparate tribes, Slavs, Finno-Ugrics, and nomads. Their nascent settlements, loosely organized, lacked a unifying force, a central authority capable of forging these communities into a cohesive realm. Legend tells of a pivotal moment, a plea issued by the warring tribes themselves, exhausted by ceaseless internal strife, seeking order, a neutral hand to govern, to bring peace. What kind of leader would answer such an unusual call? They turned north across the Baltic Sea to the formidable Norsemen, the Varangian Vikings, known for raiding, sophisticated trade, and stable, if ruthless, rule. The primary chronicle immortalizes this tale, an invitation extended to chieftain Rurik and his brothers to rule and command us. This wasn't just a desperate cry, it was profound self-awareness, acknowledging indigenous leadership had failed to create harmony. But how did these northern newcomers manage to unify such a vast and diverse territory? Rurik, tradition holds, accepted. Arriving around 862 CE, he established power in Ladoga, then Novgorod. His retinue of warriors and administrators laid Russia's first statehood stones. This moment, whether fact or myth, signifies the genesis of an enduring political entity, a realm where foreign influence would repeatedly clash with and merge with native traditions. Imagine the sheer audacity of these early rulers, venturing into unknown lands. Rurik's successors embarked on southward expansion, drawn by the lucrative route from the Varangians to the Greeks, trade routes connecting the Baltic to the Black Sea. This lifeline of commerce and culture became the state's spine. Towns blossomed, settlements fortified, and disparate tribes gradually came under Varangian princely sway. It was a slow, often violent process, irrevocably altering East Slavic destiny. What made Kiev so irresistible to these expansionist Norsemen? Rurik's kinsman Oleg made a decisive move in 882, seizing Kiev, a strategic Dnieper settlement declaring it Mother of Rus cities. This act was symbolic unification, creating Kievan Rus's core. Kiev, with fertile lands, Dnieper access, and Byzantine proximity, was perfectly positioned to become this burgeoning state's heart. Could this patchwork of power truly hold together? Under Oleg and successors, the early Rus state solidified. Princes assimilated into Slavic culture, adopting customs and names. They ruled through brutal tribute collection, asserting authority and funding expeditions. This effective system also laid groundwork for future internal conflicts, as princes vied for lucrative territories. How would her people react to such a radical change? Princess Olga, regent for her son Sviatoslav after Igor's assassination, dramatically demonstrated the nascent state's ruthlessness. Her vengeful campaign against the Drevlians was legendary, culminating in their subjugation. More importantly, Olga became the first Rus ruler to convert to Christianity, journeying to Constantinople in 957 for Orthodox baptism. This personal conversion hinted at a monumental shift. This wasn't just a change of religion, it was the birth of a new civilization. Christianity's full embrace awaited her grandson, Vladimir the Great. His early reign was pagan and expansionist, yet a profound transformation redefined Russian history. Faced with a choice of faiths, Islam, Judaism, Roman Catholicism, or Orthodox Christianity, Vladimir dispatched envoys. Their reports, especially on Hagia Sophia's awe-inspiring beauty in Constantinople, captivated him. They described a divine presence so palpable, we knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth. This was no mere political decision. It was an aesthetic and spiritual revelation. How deeply would this Eastern orientation embed itself in the national character? In 988 CE, Vladimir chose Orthodox Christianity for Kievan Rus. He ordered mass baptisms in the Dnieper, forcibly washing away pagan belief. Temples dismantled, idols cast down, churches rose. This conversion was a masterstroke, aligning Rus with powerful Byzantium, opening doors to trade, diplomacy, and a rich cultural inheritance of art, architecture, and written language. But could this golden age truly last? Orthodoxy's adoption had profound, lasting consequences. It provided a unifying ideology, a shared cultural and spiritual framework for diverse peoples. Byzantine priests and scholars arrived, bringing Cyrillic script, liturgical texts, and educational foundations. Stone churches, adorned with frescoes and mosaics, transformed Rus's visual identity, anchoring its people to a grander narrative. This complex system, designed to ensure family rule, ironically became its undoing. The Byzantine connection offered a distinct alternative to the Latin West, solidifying a unique East Slavic identity. While Western Europe developed under Roman Catholicism, Rus looked east, steeped in Constantinople's traditions. This early divergence shaped geopolitics, culture, and the Russian psyche for centuries. Following Vladimir, his son Yaroslav the Wise ushered in Kievan Rus's Golden Age, 1019–1054, a period of unprecedented cultural flourishing, legal innovation, and diplomatic engagement. How would this fragmentation leave them vulnerable to a truly devastating threat? Yaroslav codified laws, creating the Ruskaya Pravda, Eastern Europe's first comprehensive legal code. He fostered literacy, established schools, and commissioned Greek text translations, transforming Kiev into a vibrant learning and art center. Kiev became one of Europe's largest, most magnificent cities, boasting splendid cathedrals like St. Sophia, adorned with frescoes and mosaics. Its markets bustled, its court attracted scholars. This era demonstrated the immense potential of a unified, culturally rich Rus. This was a force of nature, a harbinger of unimaginable suffering. Yaroslav, father-in-law of Europe through strategic royal marriages, solidified Kievan Rus's international standing. Yet in prosperity, seeds of discord were sown. His rota system succession, where princes moved through principalities inheriting Kiev last proved unstable. It led to endless squabbles as ambitious princes vied for power. Following Yaroslav's death, Kievan Rus began its inexorable decline. The scale of devastation was almost unfathomable. Princely feuds intensified, weakening Kiev and fragmenting the state. External pressures mounted as nomadic Cumans launched devastating raids, disrupting trade and forcing populations northward. The once vibrant route from the Varangians to the Greeks became perilous. Then from the east came terrifying swiftness. In the early 13th century, the Mongol Empire, forged by Genghis Khan, swept Eurasia with unprecedented speed and destructive power. Their disciplined cavalry created the largest land empire. No kingdom, no army, no fortress stemmed their advance. How would a people recover from such utter annihilation? In 1223, a preliminary Mongol force clashed with Rus and Cuman armies at the Kalka River, annihilating them. It was a brutal, unheeded preview. A decade later, in 1237, the Golden Horde, led by Badu Khan, descended. The invasion was a cataclysm. City after city fell, populations massacred, buildings razed, treasures plundered. What kind of lasting psychological scar would such prolonged servitude leave? Ryazan, Vladimir, Suzdal, Chernigov, and finally Kiev, once mother of Rus cities, succumbed. The siege of Kiev in 1240 was brutal, leaving the city in ruins, its population decimated. Chroniclers described utter desolation. This wasn't merely defeat. It was an existential blow, shattering a state built over centuries. For nearly 250 years, the Rus lands endured the Mongol Yoke. This was a crucible that forged a new kind of Russian state. It was foreign domination, economic exploitation, cultural isolation. Mongols established vassalage, demanding heavy tribute, the *Yarlik, and requiring princes to receive pats of office. This constant humiliation underscored subjugation. The Mongol Yoke had profound consequences, severing Rus from Renaissance Europe, pushing it east, reinforcing its unique Orthodox identity. How could a humble outpost rise to such prominence amidst such oppression? The tribute system drained resources, hindering recovery and fostering obedience to distant authority. Princes learned to appease Mongol overlords, often at rivals' expense, solidifying autocratic rule. The Mongols inadvertently contributed to new power centers. While Kiev lay in ruins, other cities, particularly in the forested northeast, slowly rebuilt. Moscow, initially minor, strategically located away from invasion routes, gradually emerged as a significant player. But when would the yoke finally be cast off? Moscow's princes, shrewd and opportunistic, navigated Golden Horde politics, slowly accumulating power and land. Its ascent was a testament to geographic fortune, clever diplomacy, and ruthless ambition. Princes like Ivan I Moneybag gained Mongol trust, becoming principal tax collectors for Rus. This granted immense wealth and influence, allowing them to buy principalities, recruit warriors, and build the Kremlin, Russia's symbolic heart. Moscow became a magnet for power. What would this newfound freedom mean for the identity of this emerging nation? This strategic collaboration, controversial, proved crucial for Moscow's long-term survival. It allowed consolidation of power without Mongol interference, presenting Moscow as protector against raids and strife. Over generations, Moscow's territory expanded, its princes seeing themselves as heirs to Kievan Rus and unifiers of fragmented lands. The decisive moment came with Ivan III, Ivan the Great, reigning 1462 to 1505. This was a conscious effort to project power, both internally and externally. A ruler of immense vision, Ivan methodically consolidated power, bringing numerous principalities, including Novgorod, under Moscow's direct control. He saw himself as sovereign ruler of all Rus. His ambition matched strategic brilliance. This was the true beginning of a unified Russian state, ready to assert independence. In 1480, Ivan the Great famously ended the Mongol Yoke in a largely bloodless standoff on the Ugra River. Mongol forces, weakened and surprised, simply retreated. How would this absolute authority, manifest in the character of its first Tsar. This event, more symbolic than military victory, marked the definitive end of foreign domination, ushering in full Russian sovereignty. It was profound liberation. Russia was no longer a vassal. Under Ivan the Great, Moscow asserted itself as the Third Rome. With Constantinople's fall in 1453, Moscow saw itself as spiritual successor to Rome and Byzantium, the last bastion of Orthodox Christianity. This ideology justified Moscow's expanding authority and claim to universal spiritual leadership, shaping Russia's unique world role. This coronation marked a significant shift, elevating the Moscow ruler from a mere grand prince to an emperor, a spiritual and temporal head of a burgeoning empire. Ivan the Great also laid foundations for Russian autocracy. He adopted the double-headed eagle, a Byzantine imperial symbol, and introduced elaborate court rituals to enhance monarchical authority. Italian architects rebuilt the Kremlin, transforming it into a magnificent complex reflecting Moscow's new capital status. His grandson, Ivan the Terrible, would take autocratic consolidation to terrifying extremes. Crowned the first Tsar of all Rus in 1547, a title from Caesar, Ivan explicitly asserted his divine right to rule, placing himself above any earthly authority. This was more than political maneuvering. It was an act of profound psychological violence. Ivan's early reign saw ambitious reforms and military expansion. He convened the first Zemsky Sabor and reformed the Sudebnik asterisk. He created the Streltsy asterisk, a new standing army, and expanded Russia's borders, conquering Kazan and Astrakhan. These were achievements of a capable monarch. Yet, a darker side emerged, exacerbated by personal tragedies and perceived boyar betrayals. His paranoia grew, leading to the Oprichnina, a period of intense repression and terror, 1565–1572. What would be the ultimate cost of such unchecked power? Ivan divided his realm. The Zemshchina asterisk, governed by boyars, and the asterisk Oprichnina asterisk, his personal domain, ruled directly by him and his feared oprichniki. This brutal secret police, clad in black with dog heads and brooms, symbolized their mission to gnaw out and sweep away treason. The oprichnina was a systematic terror campaign crushing boyar power, confiscating lands, and eliminating opposition. Thousands were executed, cities like Novgorod sacked. Russia's economic and social fabric was disrupted, leaving a deep psychological scar. A single moment of madness, with repercussions for generations. Ivan the Terrible's reign solidified absolute, divinely ordained autocracy. He broke the old aristocracy's power, ensuring less internal resistance. Yet his brutal methods sowed instability, leaving fear and arbitrary power. He was a paradox, brilliant strategist and tyrant whose demons inflicted immense suffering. Tragically, in 1581, he accidentally killed his own son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, in a fit of rage. This devastated the Tsar, plunging the succession into crisis, leaving only his weak, sickly son, Fyodor, as heir. The very survival of Russia hung by a thread. When Fyodor I, the last Rurikid Tsar, died childless in 1598, the ancient dynasty ended. This dynastic crisis plunged Russia into the time of troubles, 1598–1613, an era of interregnum, civil war, famine, foreign intervention, and profound social upheaval, threatening to tear the nascent state apart. The immediate cause was the lack of a clear successor. This wasn't just a political crisis. It was a humanitarian catastrophe. Fyodor's brother-in-law, Boris Godunov, elected Tsar, faced suspicion, famine, and relentless pretenders. A devastating famine, 1601–1603, exacerbated by poor harvests, led to widespread starvation and social unrest, pushing society to the brink. The power vacuum created fertile ground for impostors. The most famous, false Dmitrii, claimed to be Ivan the Terrible's miraculously escaped son. Supported by Polish magnates, he seized Moscow and was crowned Tsar in 1605. How could a nation fall for such deceptions, again and again? His brief reign ended abruptly with assassination, paving the way for further pretenders and deepening chaos. The time of troubles became a brutal struggle: ambitious boyar factions, Cossack rebels, and foreign invaders. Poland-Lithuania intervened, occupying Moscow. Sweden exploited the weakness, seizing northern territories. Russia was carved up, its sovereignty undermined, its people suffering under war, famine, lawlessness. It was a national nightmare, a descent into anarchy. This wasn't merely about choosing a new czar, it was about saving Russia itself. Amidst this profound crisis, a powerful sense of national identity and religious unity coalesced among common people and the Orthodox Church. Faced with foreign occupation and Catholic influence, a call for national liberation emerged. The identity forged in the Mongol Yoke now had to defend itself. In 1612, a people's militia, led by Kuzma Minin and Prince Dmitry Pozharsky, drove Polish forces from Moscow. This act of national redemption, born of popular will, paved the way for a new czar. This traumatic period served as a brutal lesson, shaping the future trajectory of the Russian state for centuries to come, setting the stage for an even grander, yet equally complex imperial project. In 1613, a Zemsky Sabor representing various social classes elected Mikhail Romanov, a young, uncontroversial boyar, to the throne. This marked the end of the time of troubles and the beginning of a new dynasty. The period left an indelible mark on the Russian psyche: a deep-seated fear of anarchy, a profound desire for strong, centralized authority, and an enduring belief in a single, powerful ruler to prevent national dissolution. It reinforced autocratic tendencies established by the Ivans, creating a mandate for absolute rule as the only guarantor of stability and survival. The mandate for absolute rule, forged in the fires of the time of troubles, now rested firmly in the hands of the Romanov Dynasty. This new line, initially chosen for its neutrality, would, over 3 centuries, transform a fractured, inward-looking kingdom into a sprawling, formidable empire. Their reign began with consolidation, with Mikhail Romanov and his immediate successors working to restore order, codify laws, and slowly expand state control over the vast territories. Yet for decades, Russia remained largely isolated from the intellectual currents and technological advancements sweeping through Western Europe, a slumbering giant tethered to ancient traditions and a deeply entrenched agrarian society. But how long could such an immense nation remain untouched by the accelerating pace of the world beyond its borders? The true seismic shift would arrive with the ascension of a figure whose very existence seemed to defy the staid conservatism of the Muscovite court. Born in 1672, he was a giant among men, not just in stature but in ambition and vision. This was a ruler who saw not a stagnant inheritance, but a raw canvas upon which to paint a new destiny for his people. He understood, with a stark clarity that few before him possessed, that Russia's future lay not in preserving its isolation, but in forcefully embracing the very forces that had made other European powers so dominant. But how would he convince a deeply traditional society to abandon centuries of custom for an uncertain, modern future? His early years were marked by a fascination with shipbuilding, military drills, and the practical sciences, often shunning courtly life for the company of foreign craftsmen and soldiers in Moscow's German quarter. This unconventional upbringing instilled in him a profound appreciation for Western expertise and a burning impatience with Russian backwardness. In 1697, in an unprecedented move for a Russian monarch, he embarked on the Grand Embassy, a diplomatic mission that was, in truth, an extended journey of personal discovery and industrial espionage. He traveled incognito through Livonia, Brandenburg, Holland, and England, working in shipyards, studying fortifications, and meeting with scientists and statesmen. What profound insights did this direct exposure to European innovation spark within him? He returned to Russia not merely with new knowledge, but with a revolutionary blueprint for transformation. The first priority was military reform. He understood that a modern state required a modern army and, crucially, a navy. He abolished the antiquated Streltsy regiments, replacing them with a standing army based on conscription and European training models. He founded military academies, brought in foreign officers, and personally oversaw the construction of a powerful fleet. This was not just about defense. It was about projecting power and securing Russia's place at the European table. Yet, these radical changes were met with fierce resistance from conservative elements within society. How would he overcome this deeply ingrained opposition? His vision extended far beyond military might. He sought to reorient Russia geographically, culturally, and politically. His gaze turned towards the Baltic Sea, a vital gateway to Western trade and influence, then dominated by the Swedish Empire under the formidable Charles XII. This ambition ignited the Great Northern War, a brutal, protracted conflict that raged for over 2 decades. The initial Russian defeats, most notably at Narva in 1700, only hardened his resolve. He famously declared that the Swedes would teach us how to win. And indeed, they did. What immense sacrifices would be demanded of the Russian people to achieve this strategic imperative? The turning point came at the Battle of Poltava in 1709, a decisive Russian victory that shattered Swedish power and fundamentally altered the balance of power in Northern Europe. With Baltic access secured, he pressed ahead with his most audacious project: the construction of a new capital, St. Petersburg, on marshy, inhospitable land at the mouth of the Neva River. This window to the west was built at immense human cost, a testament to his iron will and disregard for traditional constraints. It was a conscious break from Moscow, a symbol of Russia's new European identity. But could a city built on such suffering truly embody a brighter future? His reforms permeated every aspect of Russian life. He reorganized the government, replacing the old Boyar Duma with a senate and various colleges, creating a more centralized, bureaucratic administration. He brought the Orthodox Church under state control, abolishing the Patriarchate and establishing the Holy Synod. He encouraged industry, reformed the alphabet, introduced the Julian calendar, and even famously mandated that courtiers shave their beards and adopt Western dress, sparking outrage among traditionalists. These were not mere cosmetic changes. They were an attempt to fundamentally re-engineer the cultural fabric of a nation. But did these top-down reforms truly transform the hearts and minds of the populace, or merely enforce outward conformity? By the time of his death in 1725, Russia had been irrevocably altered. It was no longer a peripheral kingdom but an empire, a recognized European power with a modern army, a nascent navy, and a new capital. He had dragged Russia, often kicking and screaming, into the modern age. Yet this progress came at a terrible price: increased serfdom, brutal taxation, and a widening chasm between the westernized elite and the vast, traditional peasant majority. He had created an imperial model that was both dynamic and deeply authoritarian. But what would happen to this colossal, rapidly built edifice without the singular force of his personality to hold it together? The decades following his passing were marked by a period of instability, often referred to as the era of palace coups. A succession of weak rulers, often manipulated by powerful court factions and the imperial guards, briefly occupied the throne. Despite the political turmoil, the general trajectory of westernization and imperial expansion, once set in motion, continued. The reforms of the Great Transformer had created a momentum that even lesser rulers could not entirely halt. Foreign influence remained strong, and the Russian elite increasingly looked to Europe for cultural and intellectual inspiration. Yet, beneath the glittering surface of the court, the deep-seated social inequalities he had exacerbated continued to fester. Could any ruler truly reconcile the demands of a modernizing empire with the archaic social structure of serfdom? The next transformational figure to emerge was a woman of extraordinary intellect, ambition, and political acumen, a German princess by birth who would become one of Russia's most celebrated empresses. She ascended to power in 1762 through a coup that deposed her unpopular husband, Peter III, consolidating her position with masterful political maneuvering. This was Catherine, later known as Catherine the Great. She embraced the ideals of the Enlightenment, corresponding with Voltaire and Diderot, and presenting herself as an enlightened monarch dedicated to reason, justice, and the welfare of her subjects. Her reign promised a new era of intellectual and legal reform, but how much of this was genuine conviction, and how much a carefully crafted image for European consumption? Her domestic policy was a complex blend of genuine reformist impulses and pragmatic authoritarianism. She drafted the Nakaz, a sophisticated instruction to a legislative commission, advocating for legal reform, the abolition of torture, and greater equality before the law, principles drawn directly from Montesquieu and Beccaria. However, the commission ultimately failed to produce a new code of laws, and many of her more liberal ideas remained largely theoretical. The stark reality of governing a vast, disparate empire, coupled with the ever-present threat of aristocratic opposition, often constrained her reformist zeal. Could Enlightenment ideals truly take root in the soil of Russian autocracy? A brutal awakening came in 1773 with Pugachev's rebellion, a massive peasant uprising led by a Don Cossack who claimed to be the deposed Peter III. This revolt, fueled by deep-seated resentment against serfdom, heavy taxation, and state interference in traditional Cossack liberties, swept across southeastern Russia, threatening Moscow itself. The rebellion, though eventually crushed with extreme brutality, deeply shocked Catherine. It exposed the fragility of the social order and the explosive potential of peasant discontent. The experience led her to abandon many of her more liberal reforms and instead tighten control over the peasantry, further entrenching serfdom. What price did Russia pay for this suppression of its most vulnerable population? Despite this internal retrenchment, Catherine's reign was a golden age of imperial expansion and cultural flourishing. She pursued an aggressive foreign policy, significantly enlarging Russia's borders. Her primary targets were the Ottoman Empire and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Through two successful wars against the Ottomans, Russia gained crucial access to the Black Sea, annexing Crimea and securing a strategic foothold in the south. This expansion opened up fertile lands for settlement and trade, solidifying Russia's status as a major naval power. But what were the long-term geopolitical consequences of this southward thrust? Simultaneously, she orchestrated the partitions of Poland, a cynical but highly effective act of realpolitik carried out in concert with Prussia and Austria. Over three successive partitions in 1772, 1793, and 1795, the ancient Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was erased from the map, its territories absorbed by its more powerful neighbors. Russia gained vast new lands and a significant Orthodox and Jewish population, but also inherited a legacy of Polish resentment that would simmer for centuries. Her reign saw Russia's territory grow by an astonishing 200,000 square miles. Yet, did this territorial grandeur truly translate into internal strength and stability? Culturally, Catherine fostered the arts and sciences, establishing academies, libraries, and theaters. French became the language of the court and the educated elite, further cementing the cultural divide between the nobility and the common people. She left Russia a truly formidable European power, a colossus spanning two continents, whose influence was felt from the Baltic to the Black Sea. But the fundamental contradiction of her reign, an enlightened autocrat ruling over an enslaved populace, would become the defining challenge for her successors. How would this inherent tension ultimately shape Russia's destiny? The dawn of the 19th century brought a new Tsar, Alexander I, and with him, the storm of the Napoleonic Wars. Initially, Alexander harbored liberal inclinations, even contemplating constitutional reforms and the abolition of serfdom. However, the revolutionary fervor emanating from France, culminating in Napoleon's rise, soon overshadowed these domestic ambitions. Russia found itself drawn into a series of coalitions against France, suffering bitter defeats at Austerlitz and Friedland. These early encounters highlighted the formidable power of Napoleonic France. Could any European power truly stand against the Corsican emperor? A temporary truce, the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807, saw Alexander and Napoleon meet on a raft in the middle of the Neman River, ostensibly to divide Europe between them. But this uneasy alliance was short-lived, strained by economic blockades and competing imperial ambitions. By 1812, the inevitable clash arrived. Napoleon, at the head of his Grand Armée, a force of over 600,000 men drawn from across Europe, launched his catastrophic invasion of Russia. This was not merely a war. It was a test of national survival. What immense sacrifices would the Russian people be called upon to make to repel this existential threat? The Russian strategy was one of scorched earth and strategic retreat, drawing the French ever deeper into the vast, unforgiving interior. The Battle of Borodino, a horrific and bloody encounter outside Moscow, saw immense casualties on both sides but failed to deliver a decisive French victory. Napoleon entered Moscow to find it largely abandoned, and soon after engulfed in flames, a deliberate act of destruction by the retreating Russians. With winter rapidly approaching and his supply lines stretched to breaking point, Napoleon was forced to order a retreat, a decision that sealed the fate of his army. What horrors awaited the retreating French forces in the unforgiving Russian winter? The Patriotic War of 1812 became a defining moment in Russian national identity. The brutal winter, combined with relentless attacks by Russian forces and Cossacks, decimated the Grand Armée. Fewer than 100,000 men survived the retreat. Russia had not only defended itself, but had played the pivotal role in breaking Napoleon's power, subsequently spearheading the liberation of Europe. Alexander I emerged as the savior of Europe, playing a leading role at the Congress of Vienna in 1815, which redrew the map of post-Napoleonic Europe. He championed the Holy Alliance, an attempt to maintain monarchical order and Christian values against future revolutionary threats. Yet, had this triumph abroad truly resolved Russia's pressing internal challenges? Despite his earlier liberal leanings, Alexander I grew increasingly conservative in his later years, haunted by fears of revolution. The Decembrist Revolt of 1825, a failed coup by a group of liberal-minded officers who sought to establish a constitutional monarchy and abolish serfdom, underscored the simmering discontent among the educated elite. Though swiftly suppressed, it revealed the growing chasm between the autocratic state and a segment of society yearning for reform. It was a potent harbinger of future revolutionary struggles. How would the next Tsar respond to this audacious challenge to absolute power? Nicholas I, Alexander's younger brother, ascended the throne determined to eradicate all traces of liberalism. He became known as the Iron Tsar, a staunch defender of autocracy, orthodoxy, and nationality. His reign was characterized by rigid conservatism, pervasive censorship, and the expansion of the secret police, the Third Section, to monitor and suppress any form of dissent. He believed that strong, centralized authority was the only guarantor of stability, a direct echo of the Romanov Mandate forged after the time of troubles. But could a nation truly thrive under such an oppressive hand? Under Nicholas, Russia's internal development stagnated compared to its Western European neighbors, who were rapidly industrializing. Serfdom remained the bedrock of the economy, hindering agricultural innovation and preventing the emergence of a free labor force. The Crimean War, 1853–1856, brought this stark reality into sharp focus. Russia, despite its vast army, suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of an alliance of Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire. Its outdated military technology, poor infrastructure, and inefficient administration were starkly exposed. The war, fought on Russia's doorstep, revealed the profound backwardness of the empire. What profound lesson did this military defeat teach the autocratic state? The defeat in Crimea made it painfully clear that Russia could not maintain its status as a great power, let alone defend itself effectively, without fundamental internal reforms. Alexander II, who succeeded his father Nicholas I in 1855, recognized this urgent necessity. He inherited an empire teetering on the brink, and his reign would be defined by a series of monumental changes, earning him the title, the Liberator. His most audacious and historically significant act came in 1861, the emancipation of the serfs. This decree, freeing over 23 million private serfs, was the single largest act of social engineering in Russian history. But did freedom truly bring prosperity to the newly liberated peasants? The emancipation was a complex and imperfect reform. While serfs were granted personal freedom and the right to own land, they were often required to pay redemption payments to their former landlords for decades, effectively tying them to their communes. The land allocated to them was frequently insufficient, and the system often created new forms of dependency. While it broke the chains of personal servitude, it did not immediately alleviate rural poverty or address the deep-seated inequalities in land ownership. The seeds of future agrarian discontent were sown in the very act of liberation. What unforeseen consequences would this monumental reform unleash? Alexander II's reforms extended beyond serfdom. He introduced judicial reforms, establishing an independent judiciary, trial by jury, and open court proceedings, a radical departure from the previous arbitrary system. Military reforms reduced the term of service and modernized training. Local self-government was introduced through the creation of zemstvos, elected district and provincial assemblies that provided some limited experience in public administration and social welfare. These great reforms aimed to modernize Russia's institutions and create a more responsive state. Yet, did these reforms truly satisfy the growing aspirations for greater freedom and participation? Paradoxically, these very reforms, by raising expectations and creating new avenues for public discourse, also fueled the growth of revolutionary movements. Intellectuals and students, disillusioned by the limited scope of the reforms and the persistence of autocracy, began to advocate for more radical change. Populist movements emerged, seeking to go to the people and stir revolutionary sentiment among the peasantry. Nihilists and anarchists, believing that the entire system needed to be destroyed, resorted to terrorism. Alexander II, the great reformer, found himself increasingly targeted by those who felt his reforms did not go far enough. What tragic irony awaited the liberator Tsar? In 1881, after several failed attempts, Alexander II was assassinated by a bomb thrown by a member of the revolutionary group Narodnaya Volya, People's Will. His death marked a profound turning point, ending the era of reform and ushering in a period of conservative reaction. His successor, Alexander III, deeply traumatized by his father's assassination, reversed many of the liberal tendencies of the previous reign. He believed that the reforms had been a mistake, leading only to chaos and violence. His reign was characterized by a determined effort to restore autocratic principles and suppress dissent. How would this renewed conservatism impact Russia's development? Alexander II's policies emphasized orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality, strengthening state control over the church, reinforcing the Tsar's absolute power, and pursuing a policy of Russification among the empire's diverse ethnic minorities. The secret police's powers were expanded, censorship tightened, and judicial reforms were curtailed. Yet, even as he clamped down on political freedoms, Alexander II's government, under figures like Sergei Witte, also presided over a period of significant industrialization. The state actively promoted railway construction, heavy industry, and foreign investment, transforming Russia from a predominantly agrarian society into a burgeoning industrial power. Could economic modernization truly coexist with political repression indefinitely? The rapid industrialization, while boosting Russia's economic output, also created immense social upheaval. Millions of peasants migrated to cities, forming a new, rapidly growing urban working class, or proletariat. These factory workers lived in squalid conditions, endured long hours and low wages, and became fertile ground for revolutionary agitation. Marxism, with its promise of a workers' revolution, began to gain traction among the burgeoning intelligentsia and the industrial workforce. The social fabric of Russia was being stretched to its breaking point. What dangerous forces were gathering beneath the surface of this outwardly powerful empire? Nicholas II, the last Romanov Tsar, ascended the throne in 1894, inheriting an empire burdened by deep social contradictions, political repression, and the accelerating pace of industrial change. He was a man ill-suited to the monumental challenges of his time, deeply committed to the principle of autocracy, but lacking the vision and decisiveness to navigate the turbulent currents of modernization. His reign was marked by a series of crises that would ultimately lead to the collapse of the dynasty. How would this well-intentioned, yet ultimately indecisive, ruler confront the gathering storm? The first major blow came with the disastrous Russo-Japanese War of 1904–1905. Russia, confident in its imperial might, underestimated the rising power of Japan and suffered a humiliating series of defeats on land and sea. The loss of the entire Baltic fleet at Tsushima was a particularly shocking blow to national prestige. This military humiliation, coupled with long-standing grievances, ignited widespread unrest across the empire. It shattered the myth of invincibility and exposed the deep incompetence of the autocratic regime. What would be the immediate consequence of such a profound national disgrace? The Revolution of 1905 erupted in the wake of the war. Bloody Sunday, when imperial guards fired on a peaceful procession of workers marching to present a petition to the Tsar, sparked a wave of strikes, peasant uprisings, and mutinies. Faced with a crumbling state, Nicholas II was forced to issue the October Manifesto, promising civil liberties and the establishment of an elected legislative assembly, the Duma. This marked a significant, albeit reluctant, concession to constitutionalism. But how much real power would this new parliament truly wield? The Duma, though a step towards representative government, remained largely circumscribed by the Tsar's autocratic powers. Nicholas frequently dissolved uncooperative Duma and manipulated electoral laws to ensure a more compliant assembly. Prime Minister Pyotr Stolypin attempted a series of ambitious agrarian reforms, aiming to create a class of independent, prosperous peasants, believing this would be a bulwark against revolution. His wager on the strong sought to dissolve the communal land system and encourage private land ownership. While these reforms had some success, they were incomplete and met with resistance, and Stolypin himself was assassinated in 1911. The window for gradual reform was rapidly closing. Could Russia find a path to stability before it was too late? By the early 20th century, Russia was a paradox. A vast, powerful empire with a rapidly industrializing economy, yet plagued by deep social inequalities, political repression, and a simmering revolutionary underground. Its burgeoning cities were hotbeds of radicalism, its countryside still gripped by poverty and land hunger, and its autocratic government increasingly out of touch with the demands of a modernizing society. The imperial project, once a source of strength, was now a source of immense strain. As the great European powers maneuvered towards the precipice of global conflict, Russia, with its internal contradictions and external ambitions, found itself poised on the brink. The stage was set for a cataclysm that would not only sweep away the Romanov Dynasty, but fundamentally reshape the course of human history. And so, the vast, complex tapestry of Russian history, woven over 1,000 years, reached a dramatic and irreversible knot. From the misty origins of the Rus principalities, born of Viking longships and Slavic forests, to the sprawling empire of the Romanovs, a singular, relentless drive for power and purpose defined its course. This was a land forged in the crucible of invasion and expansion, where identity was perpetually contested, shaped by orthodox faith, autocratic rule, and the sheer, unforgiving expanse of its geography. Every czar, every peasant, every reformer, every revolutionary was part of a grand, often brutal, experiment in nation-building, striving to reconcile its unique heritage with the relentless march of modernity. But how much of this destiny was truly inevitable? The story we have traversed is one of profound contradictions. A deeply spiritual people often governed by ruthless pragmatism, a nation that looked both east and west, perpetually seeking its place on the world stage. We have witnessed the titanic struggles of princes, the iron will of autocrats, the fervent dreams of those who yearned for a different future. From Ivan the Great's consolidation to Peter's westernization, from Catherine's enlightenment to Alexander II's emancipation, each era brought immense transformation, yet also sowed the seeds of future conflict. The very forces that built this colossal state, its centralized authority, its vast territorial ambitions, its suppression of dissent, ultimately became the fault lines upon which it would fracture. Could such a deep-seated system truly adapt without shattering? The year 1917, then, was not merely an event, but the culmination of centuries of these unresolved tensions, a collision of ancient traditions and modern aspirations. The themes of power, identity, and change, which have echoed throughout our journey, found their most explosive expression in that pivotal moment. The collapse of the imperial order, the final, tragic act of the Romanov Dynasty, unleashed forces that would ripple across the globe, fundamentally altering the political landscape of the 20th century and beyond. The questions of governance, social justice, and Russia's role in the world, forged in the fires of its early history, would now be answered in ways unimaginable to its earliest rulers. To understand modern Russia, indeed, to understand much of the modern world, one must first grasp the colossal forces that shaped its journey from a collection of scattered settlements to the crucible of global revolution. The echoes of that thousand-year saga resonate still, reminding us of the enduring power of history to shape our present and future.